Therefore, this psalm, why, O Lord, is against this persecution. Through it, however, the persecution which Christ suffered from his own son Judas was prefigured. Little children, yet a little while I am with you. John 3:33. And again, can the children of the bridegroom mourn as long as the bridegroom is with them? Matthew 9:15. Christ fled from this Judas when, after he had left, he withdrew with the other apostles to the Mount of Olives as the Passion drew near. And just as David offered peace to his hostile son when he commanded the people going into war, saying, "Save the boy Absalom," 2 Samuel 18:5, and saying after he had been killed, "Who will grant to me that I might die in place of you, Absalom, my son," 2 Samuel 18:33. So Christ did toward Judas the traitor, as is clear at the supper and in the kiss. On account of this, Absalom is well said to mean peace of the father, for the Hebrew Abba is translated father in Latin. Shalom is peace, and Judas betrayed Christ with an offering of peace. And just like Absalom, Judas also died hanging. After his death, Christ reigned in peace, since he rose in glory, and this can be applied to all the tribulations of the church. According to the mortal sense, it can be against the afflictions which she suffers from her enemies, whether temporal or spiritual, and the feelings of a man crying out are expressed. He makes 2 points regarding this. First, he anticipates the attempt of his adversaries, or lays out his own torments to God. Second, he testifies that the divine help is with him, but you, O Lord, are my protector. But when he says they are multiplied, namely the Gentiles, the people, the rulers, and the princes, he is describing the persecution in regard to the number of those harming him. And it is not only these strangers, but also his son. They are multiplied beyond the hairs of my head. Psalm 39:13. And in regard to the motive of the harm, he testifies that it is without cause. Why? As 1 Samuel 26:18 says, "What have I done, or what evil is there in my hand?" And in regard to his many torments, he testifies that they disturb him with a multitude of afflictions. They afflict me. The thistle is a prickly plant. Thorns and thistles shall it bring forth to you. Genesis 3:18. Therefore those things that prick one afflict one. Now they pricked Christ by beating, scourging, spitting, and mocking him, and by intending his death. This is what he means when he says, "Many are those who rise up, namely by their actions." For Absalom desired to kill David, as is clear in the advice of Hushai in 2 Samuel 17. Similarly, Judas handed Christ over to death. Further, they afflict him by disparaging him or proposing falsehoods. Many say to my soul, there is no salvation for him in his God. Against this is what Psalm 36:39 said, "But the salvation of the just is from the Lord." For if the wicked considered this, they would not insouciantly rise up against the just, but because they do not believe this, or because they scorn the power of God, or the justice of men, they say with their mouths and works, "There is no salvation for him in his God," that is, in him whom he worships and treats as his God. The persecutors also say this about Christ. For if they had hoped in the resurrection, Judas would not have handed him over, nor would they have killed him. And the sense is, he will not save him, nor is he the Son of God. So they said, "If you are the Son of God, come down from the cross," Matthew 27:40. And if he is the King of Israel, let him now come down from the cross, and we will believe him, Matthew 27:42. But you, O Lord. This is the second part. Here he shows the help brought by God. And he makes 2 points regarding this. First, he shows that the divine help is particularly present to him. Second, that the divine help is present generally to all, as salvation is of the Lord. And he puts forward 3 points regarding the first. First is the divine help. Second is the experience of help at "with my voice." Third is the sense of security at I will not fear. Therefore he says, but you, O Lord, as if to say, these rise up for war, but you undertake to protect. And this is better expressed by the text of Jerome, which says, my shield around me, as though he is defending me like a shield, for he guards life not only against those who desire to harm, but also glory against those who defame. And so he says, my glory, he who glories, let him glory in the Lord, 2 Corinthians 10:17. But let him who glories glory in this, that he understands and knows me, Jeremiah 9:24. And you not only assist me against those who defame me, but also you make me prevail over those oppressing me. Thus he adds, the lifter up of my head. Psalm 26:6 says, and now he has lifted up my head above my enemies. These things can be referred to Christ, who was conceived according to the human nature in the incarnation, because the Word was made flesh, John 1:14. Behold my servant, I will uphold him, my elect, my soul delights in him. Isaiah 42:1. Blessed is he whom you have chosen and assumed, Psalm 64:5. Further, he was glorious in the resurrection. Glorify me, Father, John 17:5. Also, he was exalted in the ascension, for which cause God also has exalted him, Philippians 2:9. Afterward, when he says voice, he shows his experience of help, and he puts down three things. Namely, the prayer at with my voice. Second, it's being heard at, and he has heard me. Third, how he has heard, where he says, I have slept. Concerning the first, he touches on two things which prayer should be. For one thing, it should be attentive. And so he says, with my voice, namely the voice of the heart which speaks to God, by which Moses, though physically silent in his heart, cried to the Lord. The Lord said, why do you cry to me? Exodus 14:15. Susanna was heard crying out with this same voice. She, weeping, looked up to heaven, for her heart had confidence in the Lord. Daniel 13:35. Now Hannah spoke in her heart. 1 Samuel 1:13. I will pray with the Spirit. I will pray also with the understanding. 1 Corinthians 14:15. And so he says, for when the voice does not come forth from the heart, it is not mine. The second thing prayer should be is upright. Now it is upright when it is directed rightly, and so he says to the Lord, where there is help. But as we do not know what to do, we can only turn our eyes to you, 2 Chronicles 20:12. My help is from the Lord, Psalm 122. Third, prayer should be devout. So he adds, I have cried. For a prayer is said to be clamorous according to the greatness of the desire. Let my cry come to you, Psalm 101:2, with a strong cry and tears offering up prayers, Hebrews 5:7. Afterwards, he discusses the hearing of the prayer when he says, he has heard me from his mountain, that is, from the sublime height of the divine majesty, which is inaccessible. Who shall ascend into the mountain of the Lord? Psalm 23:3, that is, to his omnipotence, or to the height of his justice, which is incomprehensible. Your judgments are a great deep, Psalm 35:7, or from his holy mountain, that is, from me, I, who is the holy mountain spoken of. And in the last days, the mountain of the house of the Lord shall be prepared. Isaiah 2:2. It goes on, I have slept. Here he shows how he is heard. Because I have risen up, for there is a difference between someone dead and someone sleeping, since a dead person does not rise up. Do you think the man who is dead will rise up again? Job 14:14. But the sleeper does rise up. Shall he who sleeps rise no more? Psalm 49. So therefore, when a trouble is so great that a man cannot return to his earlier state, it is called death. But when he, troubled or tempted, falls into sin and rises up again, he is said to sleep. So David slept, in this sense, since he was freed from his son and from sin. Now he is said to sleep who sleeps lightly, but to slumber who sleeps deeply. So another text has, I have taken slumber, that is, I slept deeply. So Christ is said to have slept because he bore the passion willingly, and to have slumbered since he underwent death. So he went from sleep to slumber. This slumber is signified by Adam's slumber. The Lord God cast a deep slumber upon Adam. Genesis 2:21. Since the church was formed from the side of Christ on the cross. Therefore he says, I have risen up by my own power. I have the power to lay down my soul, and I have the power to take it up again. John 10:18. And this is because the Lord has protected me. Another text has, he has upheld me. For he had the power of the divinity to rise up. When the just shall fall, he will not be bruised, for the Lord puts his hand under him. Psalm 36:24. Afterwards, when he says, I will not fear, he describes the confidence and security as if he should say, because I am heard, I will not fear. As Psalm 26:3 says, if a camp should stand against me, my heart shall not fear. This signifies that the Church of Christ cannot ever be entirely suppressed. For after the resurrection, the multitude of people who stood around him when he was crucified were unable to harm Christ. For Christ, rising from the dead, dies no more, Romans 6:9, and he shows whence he has this confidence when he says, arise, that is, show your power by making me rise from the dead. And this is what is meant when he says, save me. For you have struck. Earlier he said two things, that people are troubling him. Why, O Lord, are those who afflict me multiplied? And against them he says, for you have struck. Second, that they were defaming him. There is no salvation for him. And against these he says, you have broken the teeth of sinners, that is, you have wrought their evil words to nothing. I broke the jaws of the wicked man, Job 29:17. Jerome's text has, you have broken the jaws and teeth, as if to say you have struck so strongly that the teeth are crushed to pieces. For the jaws were Absalom, the teeth were those following him, so the others were crushed when Absalom was destroyed. Finally, when he says, salvation is of the Lord, he shows that the divine help is there for the whole people. First, to preserve from evil, and so he says, salvation is of the Lord, and so prayer should be directed to God. Second, divine help increases good things, and so he says, your blessing is upon your people, that is, your blessing is upon the people who hope in you and not in another. The blessing of the Lord always brings an increase in good. The blessing of the Lord makes men rich, Proverbs 10:22. Now the gloss gives another reading of the psalm, namely that this is spoken by the whole Christ, that is, the church, and its head, standing fast amidst the storms of persecution. Or this psalm can be read in the moral sense as spoken in the person of any one of the faithful who is besieged by vices and sinful desires. And in this reading, David would be understood as any one of the faithful, and Absalom as fleshly appetites, as is shown in the gloss. Psalm 4, when I called upon him. Unto the end, a psalm of the song of David. When I called upon him, the God of my justice heard me. When I was in distress, you have enlarged me. Have mercy on me and hear my prayer. O sons of men, how long will you be dull of heart? Why do you love vanity and seek after lying? Know also that the Lord has made his Holy One wonderful. The Lord will hear me when I shall cry to him. Be angry and sin not. The things you say in your hearts, be sorry for them upon your beds. Offer up the sacrifice of justice and trust in the Lord. Many say, who shows us good things? The light of your face, O Lord, is shined upon us. You have given gladness to my heart. By the fruit of their grain, their wine and oil, they are multiplied. In peace, in the selfsame, I will sleep and I will rest, for you, O Lord, singularly have settled me in hope. In the preceding psalm, David begged in prayer for the help of God against his tribulations, and perceiving that he was heard, he exhorts others to trust in God. This psalm expresses the feeling of a man who, having experienced divine mercy and kindness and justice, exhorts others not to despair. Its title is Unto the End, a psalm of the Song of David. In this title, two things should be considered in relation to the whole book. That he says the psalm is of song. Second, he says unto the end. In regard to the first, note that according to 2 Samuel 6:14-15, David wrote a psalm metrically and sung it before the ark with the psaltery. Therefore a psalm is said to be what is sung with a psaltery, and cannot be sung without a psaltery. Excuse me. Some of the psalms are described as a psalm of David, which means they were made for the psaltery. Others are said to be a song of David because they were sung without an instrument. Some are psalms of the song of David, or vice versa, because these were sung both with a human voice and with the psaltery. But in some others, one or many human voices would begin without an instrument, and someone else would respond with the psaltery. And these are titled Songs of the Psalms. In others, one person would sing the psalm with a psaltery, and others would respond without the psaltery. And these are titled Psalms of the Songs. Now this is the literal difference, but mystically psalm signifies a good work, while song signifies the lifting up of the mind that results with the contemplation of eternal things, according to the gloss. When they are both included in one psalm, it signifies that the psalm treats of both these mystical meanings. Now, when it says unto the end, if this is considered in regard to the reality prefigured by the psalm, it is clear that unto the end should be understood to mean unto Christ. The end of the law is Christ, to justice for everyone who believes, Romans 10:4. But if unto the end is considered figuratively, it means that it was sung for the completion of a work or deeds, just as this psalm was made for the completion of the deliverance of David from the persecution of Absalom, as if for a victory. Others say it is for the victor in the Psalms, namely David, since he outshone everyone in the creation of the Psalms. But this does not seem to be true. Now this psalm is divided into two parts. The first begins with thanksgiving for favors received. So he says, when I called. Second, at sons of men, he ends in an exhortation to others to be converted to God. Regarding the first, he makes 2 points. First, he gives thanks for the past favors. Second, he prays for the future, and have mercy on me. Regarding the past, he makes 2 points. First, he gives thanks that he has been heard. Second, he lays out the circumstances in which he was heard at in distress. But it should be noted that there are 2 texts here. One says he heard, the other has you heard, and Jerome agrees with this, saying you heard. But this reading, nevertheless, is not authoritative. Therefore, he says, when I called, you heard me. 4 things should be considered in regard to this. First, he lays out the prayer, and it's heard being heard. So he says, you have heard, but he has not heard one who did not cry out. So he says, when I called, which is to ask for help in need. In my trouble I cried to the Lord, and he heard me. Psalm 119:1. Also it is required that he be just, since if he hears sinners, it is out of mercy, not justice. So he says, of my justice. There the gloss says, that is, giver of justice, or of my justification. The eyes of the Lord are upon the just. Psalm 33:16. Another thing which is first is that a man attribute his own justice to God and not to himself. And so he says, God, against which Romans 10:3 opposes those not knowing the justice of God and seeking to establish their own. First, therefore, he should attribute his goodness to God. Second, have justice. Third, cry out. Fourth, be heard. Now, the way he is heard is described where he says, in distress. He says he heard, and you have enlarged, either because when the psalm was written as metrical, perhaps he had to change the construction to fit the meter, or because of the nature of prayer, where a man changes this way of speaking under the influence of different feelings. Now he says, in distress you have enlarged me, since you have enlarged is greater than you have delivered, as if to say, you have not only delivered me, but you have given breadth to my heart in this distress. You have enlarged my steps under me, and my feet are not weakened. Psalm 17:37. This is either breadth of soul to endure patiently, or breadth of power, about which Genesis 9:27 says, may God enlarge Japheth. Then he says, have mercy on me by removing whatever remains of former misery, and hear me as I pray for future goods. Afterwards, when he says, O sons of men, he turns to exhorting others. About this he does 2 things. He first rebukes sinners. Second, he exhorts them to amend at no also. Regarding the first, he first calls to mind their condition. Second, he asserts their guilt at why do you love vanity. He calls to mind their condition when he says, O sons of men, which can be taken in two ways. First, in regard to evil, with emphasis on the fact that men are corruptible and prone to sin according to their lower nature. My spirit shall not remain in man forever, because he is flesh. Genesis 6:3. For the imagination and thought of man's heart are prone to evil from his youth. Genesis 8:21. Therefore he says, O sons of men, as if to say, you are showing yourselves to be sons of men, that is, of sinners, namely of Eve and Adam. How long will you be dull of heart? Woe to the sinful nation, a people laden with iniquity. Isaiah 1:4.